Welcome to episode 83 of Regional Wrap, pre-recorded on Monday the 10th of April for uploading on Wednesday 12th of April. Regional Wrap, providing an insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, industry peak bodies, are they value for money? Is my guest, Damian Coory. Damian was born and raised in Brisbane. In the early career as a journalist, he had 13 years' experience in both radio and television, working with Network 10, 3AW Melbourne, 4BC Brisbane, and the ABC. Damian was also the news director at Brisbane's Triple M FM 104 in the early 90s. He then spent 2 decades abroad, working in the Asia-Pacific region with Ed Elman Public Relations, and was the managing director of their Hong Kong and Taiwan offices. He has 20 years' experience in corporate public relations, specialising in executive communication skills, training and coaching, issues management and crisis communication. He holds an MBA from Australia's leading business school and lectured and developed courses in public relations and crisis communications for postgraduate students at Hong Kong's leading university. Damian returned to Australia in 2020 and was shocked by the political shift in the country. He started a podcast called The Other Side, and last year he ran in the federal election for Campbell Newman's Liberal Democrats in the Brisbane electorate of Ryan. Damian is also a prolific contributor to The Spectator magazine, and his show, The Other Side Australia, is starting up again on this Friday on Alan Jones' ADH TV network, which you can download as an app on your phone or smart TV. Welcome, Damian. If we could just start off with giving us a little bit of background about yourself, maybe some of your misspent childhood before you start on your journalist career and your overseas jaunts, and we'll move on from there.
Yeah, look, I grew up in Brisbane, in inner city Brisbane.
We won't hold that against you.
Very much a city boy. And I probably, people in regional Australia might know my name from, if they're of a certain age, they would know my name perhaps from the radio days of the late 80s and early 90s when I was at Macquarie Radio News and ABC Radio News, and presenting the news across a lot of regional stations around Queensland. I then moved into television in the late 90s, worked for Channel 10 for a few years, and then I moved into public relations in 1999, and I moved to Asia in 2001, spent almost 20 years over there doing corporate public relations with a couple of big American firms. And then I came back to Australia in 2020, and I was a bit horrified to sort of see the political shift that had occurred here. Thought the country had moved a little too far to the left. And I was particularly concerned as a media and PR person about the lack of diversity of opinion. There seems to be diversity of everything else, but opinion and political view in Australia. So I started a podcast in late 2020 or mid 2020 called The Other Side Australia. And that ran on a platform called the Discernible Network for all of 2021. And at the end of 2021, we wrapped it up. I ran in the federal election in a middle sort of ring Brisbane seat of Ryan in the federal election. And I ran as a Liberal Democrat in Campbell Newman's party, and I lost. I came third, though, or fourth, I think. So top out of the minor parties anyway. Which wasn't too bad for a nobody. And I learned a few lessons about Australian politics and from that side of things. And this week we're starting up the new podcast all over again. The Other Side Australia will be back on the ADH TV platform, which is the platform that Alan Jones has sort of set up and is on. And you can download that on your phone, ADH TV, or on your smart TV. Most smart TVs have it, but it's definitely there on your phone in the usual app stores. Or you can just have a look and watch the show on YouTube through ADHTV or The Other Side Australia. We're also on Facebook and Twitter if people want to get in touch.
We'll make sure we put that onto the Facebook pages and the YouTube channel when we publish it to those instruments. Now, becoming a journalist, was that based on a skill you got at school for you're good at English or something, or was it in the family? What was the encouragement to become a journalist?
I think being the youngest out of 5 kids, and having to get
you never would have got a word in.
That's right. I grew up with 7 adults. I was a bit of the afterthought. I was the youngest by a bit of a way. And I used to play radio stations in the house and make them all listen to me. It's the only way I could get people to pay the attention to me was amplify my voice. So I played with, technology a bit. Anyway, I got interested in radio, started working in community radio while I was still in primary school, actually. And just went into university, decided that journalism would be a good profession if I wanted to pursue a career in radio. And I, was lucky enough in my first sort of year or so of university to get a cadetship in journalism at 4BC in Brisbane. And that was the station that had the Macquarie network that networked out to most of regional Queensland. And I began my career in early 1986. And it was a very different world then in journalism in Australia. There were some rules. There was some rules of balance to follow.
Well, I suppose when you started journalism and that, I suppose there was still this belief or that it was the fourth estate, and basically held people to account. But it's definitely gone from that now, where I think most people would consider it, since COVID and that, the media is just the mouthpiece of the government in charge sort of thing, and whatever the populist message is. So do you think that's a problem for modern journalism, that it has forgot its original role? I mean, this goes back to the French Revolution, and that's where it got its name from, as the fourth estate, when it started to try to hold everyone to account. But a few of them lost their heads, of course.
Yes, it's a bit dangerous at times.
Yeah,
especially with some of the governments we've got today, I think.
So is there any saving grace for journalists, or is it too far gone, the fact that they all just come through university now and they're all got the same style of lecturers? They've all got to meet whatever the general consensus is and all those sort of things, and they don't have their own opinion, and they don't really ask pertinent questions.
No, look, I think there's a whole bunch of things that have happened all at once, and it's really set journalism back quite a big way in Australia. One was the development of social media, obviously, and the fact that we started to see a bit of a dilution of media concentration, which is good in one way, but in another way, it means there's not a lot of money around. The economics of the business changes, and so you can't hire as many journalists to do primary journalism, to be really out there investigating stories and things. So there's that problem. Australia also has the monster of the ABC, which I keep reminding people is an anti-competitive, in my humble opinion, slightly anti-competitive influence on the market, because it creates a barrier to entry for other startups and people who want to run media organizations, because it's so big and it's so comprehensive, and it plays in every space, and it's government funded, and you can't compete with commercial free, right? It's really hard to do a TV or radio station when you're up against this monster that's doesn't have to run the ads, because it's got this massive commercial advantage in that it gets $1 billion of taxpayers' money every year. So that makes the game pretty tough. So you got all these factors happening. You've got reduction of staff in newsrooms, a lot of pressure. You got young people coming through universities, as you say, they're not seeing a career path in journalism. So like me, they're jumping out in their early or mid 30s. We don't have a lot of older, more senior journalists like we used to have, who are sort of the adults in the room to keep the kids focused and not let them go a bit crazy. When I worked at ABC, I always just tell the story of when I worked at the ABC. We had the Triple J crowd, as you might call it, the sort of young uni, slightly left-leaning mob that would push issues, and it's healthy to have that. It's all good, part of the mix. But we also had the adults in the room. We had the older conservative people who were there to kind of say, well, hang on a minute, you've got to balance everything out, and you can't just. And nowadays, I always joke that the ABC, it's the Triple J crowd of the 1980s have grown up, and they're now the adults in the room. And yet they haven't
Not
really
very
grown up in
mature.
some ways because they haven't left the ABC. And so they haven't faced the commercial realities, I guess, of life that so many people on the land have faced, and so many people in business face, where you worry about whether you're going to make enough money to pay the staff, whether you start to understand economics, you grow up a little bit, you understand trading and capitalism, and it changes in the free market and how our system actually works.
Well,
And a lot of kids, a lot of those adults, I might say, my age in their 50s, that are in the ABC, they don't actually have that experience or that worldview, and that's a big problem.
well, that's the same sort of system that's happened within our politics. If you go back to, I'm a lot older than you, but go back to the 50s and 60s, your politicians were often the local doctor, a policeman, a farmer, a businessman, just an ordinary worker sometimes, but it was a mixture of people, but they'd been out there in the real world. But now, like journalism, it's a closeted sort of field, and even politics now is young people come from university, they get a staffing job in some politician's office, or with the Labor Party office that's in the unions or whatever, and they don't have any real world experience, especially in private enterprise where it is, you've got to make the dollars, you've got to make sure you're efficient and productive. So it's a different mentality.
We do a terrible job in our education system, and it's really a cultural thing, right? It's education, it's media, it's the church, it's family, it's all these cultural influences on kids these days that we're not teaching economics, we're not teaching civics. We are teaching, unfortunately, a whole lot of stuff that's based on kind of, identity politics, which actually has, if you go through history, it's got a Marxist kind of background to it. So it's very much about creating division along the lines of race and gender and sexuality and all those things, and stirring up trouble. And that's where you get this movement they call the woke movement now, of this sort of, we're pushing back on that a little bit in culture, and I hope we continue to do so. But it's really, worked its way through our media and our education system in Australia and around the Western liberal democracies. And it's just got to the point where, it's lazy thinking, right? It's just, I don't want to have to think too deeply about issues. So if I just side with who appears to be the good guys, and the left's always had a bit of that advantage, I think, in that, they always present the soft, caring sort of message. But we need the other side as well. You've got to have the balance, because if you have too much of that kind of nurturing, caring stuff, and you don't have enough of the, I guess, the father figure, the male figure. I've got a friend who thinks this is all connected to our views on gender and family and all this, but I'm not sure about that. But the male figure, or the father figure, the archetype of the, the government saying, well, hang on a moment, we have to tighten our belts. We can't spend like that. We have to draw a line here or there. That's kind of, that energy or that sort of idea is gone from our political and media culture, I think. And that's a serious problem, because without that balancing force, you'll go broke. And that's pretty much, where we're at with our debt at the moment as a country. We're not broke yet, but we're in a bit of trouble.
I think some of the part is too, is what you're alluding to there is where political parties and organisations have started to become maternal, in a way, in regards to they have to have this softer approach rather than this clear thought. This is right, this is wrong, this has got to be done to achieve that, and that maternalism has started to corrupt or cloud the vision where you really want to go, and by what's occurring around you and how you fit into that world, and you start to lose your objectives and your goals. And that brings me to the point in regards to the topic. Industrial peak bodies, are they value for money? And I first encountered you with listening to you with Alan Ben on Cairns Conversation,
Yes.
and we were talking about, and you were talking about industries and that, and sometimes they don't seem to be working for their members and things like that. Do you think? Well, from my observations with peak bodies, they're located in the wrong place because they're supposed to be looking after either a miner or a farmer or a grower or something in some region, but they're located in the city right next to the government offices, are the ones who beat them up. And then the people in it are usually born in Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne or wherever, or Canberra, and they're completely university focused, come from university, never really been to the regions, and have got a different concept of achievement from the people who actually employ them, like the growers.
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's a phenomenon we're seeing with a lot of bureaucracy, that it's becoming detached from the reason it originally was set up, right? And if you lose touch with your base, you're finished. But these organizations have they have a period that they'll go through where either they have to reform and get back to their base, or they die out. I mean, even political parties, we're seeing that happening at the moment with the Liberal Party's failures, consistent failures over and over and over again. I'd like to personally see the National Liberal Party in Queensland split. I'd like to see a strong country party again. And I think we need that. I think the merger of those two parties might have had its time and place. I wasn't around for that, but I certainly think in the current political climate, the current Liberal Party as it is today is not capable of representing regional Queensland, period. And we need to see a strong national party, or at least some sort of strong country party, emerge for the people of regional Queensland that's primarily focused on regional issues. It's pretty ironic that Campbell Newman became somebody who was a real voice for regions in that last federal election. But he really worked the region, got out there and really tried to understand things, because he was criticised a lot while he was in government in the state. I mean, he was criticised for a lot of things, but he did cop it around sort of being a bit too Brisbane focused, or was perceived as being a bit too Brisbane focused because of his history as Lord Mayor of Brisbane. And I think he's sort of rectified that to a little bit, but we just need a strong party. We need a strong, national party, really. We need to see that party representing regional Australia properly again, in my humble opinion. And not just regional Australia and regional issues, but the values that regional Australia represents, the values that come from people who are connected to the land. I don't want to make it sound like some cheesy cliche coming from a city guy, but you do get detached from reality in the city. We don't have the same appreciation for where stuff comes from. And I said, we're not teaching kids at school economics. We're not teaching them basic fundamental economics, how our system works, what liberalism is all about, how the free market operates. Sure, we can teach them about where the free market fails and the dangers of too much capitalism that's unregulated. But you can't just go, all capitalism's bad, and all of any free market enterprise is going to get corrupted. This direction the country's shifted in the time that I was away, and it may be because I was away for that period that I could see it a bit more, but it really was quite disturbing. But to get back on point, sorry, Bill, I've gone off a bit, but to get back on point, the industry bodies are just an extension of that. I think that phenomenon that seems to be occurring everywhere, and it's occurring in the corporate world. The corporate world isn't business an enterprise like small and medium enterprises are, the SME landscape, or in most of the rural sector. The corporate world is like government, and globally it's kind of operates like a governmental kind of machine now. And the layers of bureaucracy you see within corporations are very similar to the layers of bureaucracy we see within government. And I think that we've got to look at that as a problem. And this is maybe somewhere where the traditional left and the traditional right can come together and agree that we've got a bit of a problem in that there seems to be a corporate class, a bureaucratic class that runs the show now. I've even got my suspicions about how in control our political leaders are these days. I'm not sure, a lot of them are more scared of their departmental heads than they are of the electorate, which isn't great. So, yeah, I think that's the problem. I think we've got to look at it from that perspective. And I think some of these bodies, these industry groups are being affected. And, I did write that piece in The Spectator about the fact that the Australian industry groups, the Australian industry group, Innes Willocks is the boss, and Jennifer Westacott and the Business Council of Australia have both said to the Australian newspaper that the private sector was going to work with the government in good faith. That was their response to Jim Chalmers' manifesto, which was probably one of the most sort of left-leaning manifestos we've seen from a treasurer since the Whitlam era. That it was like, that was their response. The private sector will work with government in good faith, but we would advise against undermining the market-based system. Wow. Okay. The market-based system is the basis of our entire wealth, our liberty, our innovation, ingenuity, spirit of the country, really, at some level. And this is being talked down, and our business organizations, our industry groups, all they can say is, we're going to work with the government in good faith and would advise against undermining the market-based system. I mean, talk about hitting them with a wet feather. That sort of rhetoric would just be laughed at by, someone like Mao or Stalin in the day. Not very scary there, coming from the right. But this is the problem we've got, right? We've got not a lot of bravery, not a lot of strength, not a lot of courage. You look at what happened to Alan Jones, and being taken off the air while he's number one, while he's rating through the roof. Like, it's one thing to take someone off the air if they're not being commercially successful, but to take them off the air, not by one media organization, but by two media organizations who were our traditional conservative media organizations, right? Both of them have taken him off the air. And he's gone out and helped to set up this new network, because we're going to have to do it ourselves from the ground up if we want to have.
Well, I think that's the same for industry, and that's the same for the farmers, the graziers, and all that. I think they really have to go back and have a look at their models as the members who are actually forking out the money, and have a good look at the organisation they're promoting, and then see what needs to be done to change. Like, I've dealt with the cane growers in particular, the banana growers, Ag Force a bit, and also the Minerals Council of Queensland. But speaking to the intermediaries, like the elected presidents of those organisations, and especially the more remote ones like the banana and the sugarcane, because they're actually people who still live in the regions and that, and are tied to the industry. So they're elected by their members, and they've got a pretty good overview of what's going on the ground. But then they hand over to these boards or executives that are all from Brisbane or whatever state they're in, the state bodies. And the members in there are all university trained. And then the other thing that's different, most farmers would think, all right, the job of my people organisation is to fight for my interests in the first instance and make sure bad legislation doesn't come my way. Yet when you talk to the bodies, like the communication managers who are on a couple of $100,000 in the cane growers and Ag Force and things like that, their actual goal is to win money from the government and this is how they measure this, to mitigate the implementation of legislation. So I can't see how the members can reconcile that as a goal for their organisation, that after the bad legislation comes through, at least we get a bit of money to deal with it. It doesn't seem to make sense.
Right. So their focus is on just mitigating the bad legislation's damage rather than actually driving original. I mean, from putting my PR hat on, I'd be saying, look, you've got to get out there and lead the conversation. We've got to get out there and put our own position out there about what you want, and push that and push that and push that. By the time we've got to the legislation, it's too late. This is the problem with the modern conservative major parties, right? The Liberal and National Party at the moment, is that they're not providing a vision and an alternative government structure, values, the whole thing, not just a little bit of a policy here and a little bit of a policy there, but a massive kind of ideological values-based shift to a vision. Now, you might lose an election or two doing this, but you're going to lose those elections anyway, doing what they're doing now, as we've plainly seen. They've lost 8 elections in a row, I think, almost annihilated in Western Australia. If you don't stand up and say, hang on a minute, the country's going in the wrong direction, we need to steer back and do the sorts of things that, people like Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida are doing in America, where they're selling an ideology, where the new conservative opposition leader in Canada, Pierre Poilievre, is doing a similar thing, right? They're selling a story. They're selling this big picture, not small minutiae stuff, big picture stuff. We've got to shift the value system of the state, of the country, because at the moment we are off track. People will be inspired by that. People will follow you over time. If you have a vision and you have a plan, they'll follow you. But if you go out there and kind of flip-flop in the wind and I will do a little bit of this and I don't want to speak out too much against this policy or that policy, we better just take it easy and be very careful and worry about it. We don't upset the center, which is the mindset of the people that are developing strategy and policy within our conservative major parties at the moment. You are going to consistently lose, and you will continue to lose because you offer nothing. You offer no alternative. You simply offer more of the same. You are Labor light. You eventually must become Labor light because they are setting the agenda. You are not setting the agenda, and you're allowing them to set the agenda, and you're responding to it rather than you leading the agenda and getting out there and having a vision and having a plan. If somebody got out there and said, we're going to support small and medium-sized regional businesses, we're going to ensure that everybody gets a fair go, that it's a good market, that there's not hideous kinds of abuse of monopolistic or power from the market. We're not going to allow that. We're going to regulate that to a certain extent. Light touch regulation on a free market is a healthy thing, and then I think you'd have a tremendous amount of support. But it's getting somebody to stand up with a vision and say that. And as I say, you're not going to get it out of people from the city. In the city, the equivalent is small business, right? There's massive problems with small business, but the small business people are so overworked and exhausted by all the red tape and green tape that they face every day that they don't have a voice anymore. It's just corporations and government working together to support this machine of bureaucracy that's just growing and growing and growing and growing. And unfortunately, it's spending and spending and spending and spending. My concern, and I think my lesson from the election, sadly, was that I think until Australians really start to feel the pain, until they actually can't switch their mobile phones on, until they actually can't buy a cafe latte at the cafe because there's no milk, until they feel that pain at a tangible level, they're not going to wake up and realize really what's going on, because, as I said, we don't have the education. People don't understand the economics of it.
I think there's two sort of areas. The political area in regards to it does need a strong party to and party room to get itself reorganised, because. And the only way I think they can really do that is if they go back and start giving the branches power and give people a reason to join the party at the branch level, because they'll have a say.
I think it's got to be grassroots and it's got to be top down as well. There has to be a strong leader who inspires, right? And that will get people into the grassroots and get them active again.
Well, that's very important, that grassroots thing. But the thing
totally.
is, no one wants to come into a party and then think, well, they're just there, sit down, shut up. We want you to turn up a couple of weeks before the election to get your your jobs for handing how to vote cards, putting out posters, all this sort of, then be at the ballot box. If you just want foot soldiers, that's not encouraging anyone. And that's why people like One Nation, who else is there? There's a
Clive
few other
Palmer's UAP
that won't
and the Liberal Democrats. Yeah,
won't build a branch-based system. The Liberals and Nationals already had that, but they've let it sort of dissipate, sort of thing, where they feel as though that their voice is not listened to. So the people are filtered away, and the people who are left there are probably 60, 70, going on 80 or whatever, but not getting many young people.
Well, the young people that they're getting are the ones that have come up through the ranks of the young Liberals, and it's kind of like a career instead of it being what you said, where it's the retired doctor, it's the retired elder of our community that is somebody that we respect, that is going to spend 5 or 10 years serving the nation at the end of their career in politics. We're not getting enough of those types of people in there. We're getting these career politicians. They're detached from real life and the real world. They play a constant game of public relations and media and negotiations and that sort of thing. And it's just not a system that's working at the moment. It's not representing the people, as you said. But I think you've got to have that value set, and you've got to stick to your values. And you've got to have an inspiring leader who sells that value vision. And then you got to listen to as you said, you got to listen to the grassroots. You've got to have a system for getting policy decisions up through the grassroots. But if you've got policy that's aligned with people's values, even if they don't agree with you, if you can explain, we've taken this decision for these reasons. I know it's not going to please everybody, because nothing ever pleases everybody in a democracy. We'll take it on the chin, as long as we see a direction, we see some values. We see our nation going in the right direction, and we see spending being done respectfully, not not wasted, and not this incredible crazy kind of wastage what we've seen of late, which is really all just about taking the pain away, delaying the pain, kicking the can down the road, so that the current governments don't have to face the difficult decision of saying to the public, hey, it's tough. So this is why I am a bit concerned about the state of our democracy from a grassroots level, that maybe we've become very spoiled as a nation, and that it's really a cultural thing, and we have to look at ourselves, not our political parties. We have to look at ourselves and say, well, am I prepared to do what it takes? Am I prepared to step up? Am I prepared to speak out? Am I prepared to also shut up when necessary and suck it up when necessary, in the interests of achieving something better and greater? And a lot of people are not. It's very hard to kind of to get a situation where we've got a political system that's functioning in a really positive way, where people accept and admire and respect and want to vote for leaders who say, no, we're going to have to knuckle down here. We're going to have to take it on the chin for a while, or we're going to have to be a bit careful here, or no, we can't have funding for this project over here because we've got to focus on this.
But most of the projects we have, especially at state government level, on that, none of them are wealth creating. That's the problem. There doesn't seem to be any vision for wealth creation, either with the federal government or with the state governments. With the federal governments, it's about giving people things to ensure they get their vote, sort of thing. They've got a little bit of thing in regards to defence, but gee, they spend that money badly, don't they?
They do. And the wealth creation thing, again, as you said, it comes back to the education of the masses, right? I mean, if people don't even understand what wealth creation is, or why it's necessary, or what it means, right? They're not going to vote for it. They're going to vote for the guy who says, I'll give you more, dollars. Yeah. And that's where we're at. We're at this kind of crazy situation. We had all those handouts during COVID. Well, of course, if you're under 30 and you're being paid $700 a week and you get to watch Netflix, well, of course you're going to support lockdown, right? It's a holiday. I mean, maybe a little inconvenient one, but it's maybe better than going to work, right? So you've got a lot of people who were supporting that, who, and the Liberal Party dropped the ball on classical liberal values around.
Well, I think Morrison is fully to blame for the establishment of the stupid national cabinet. Should have never happened. The federation,
no, that's right.
The federal government's got its responsibility as a state. he should have never let them into the room, and he should have been run Australia with his cabinet, not with the premiers, and the premiers never should have got a blank check as they did to run things, and then he was just caught up in a big mess.
Well, he empowered the Labor premiers, massively empowered them. It was one of the stupidest political moves I think I've ever seen. And, you know, he paid the ultimate price, of course, for it, but politically. But it was a crazy move, and it just gave them so much more voice and say than they probably should have had. And he constantly, and it was a blame shifting move. I mean, let's face it, it's the move that you make if you're a weak leader and you want to you're a political player. You know, you're not a leader, you're a political player. You're a manager level, middle manager who creeps their way up an organization, you know, until it finally catches them. That sort of character, that sort of personality that just goes in and sort of sits around and manipulates everything and manipulates everybody, and doesn't actually say what they mean or say what they think or stick to their values and lead properly. That's my analysis of that behavior. He wanted to dump the blame. Everybody wanted to dump the blame. Nobody wanted to have to be left carrying the can. Nobody wanted to make the decisions. The way that the premiers abdicated their leadership and responsibility to the CHOs was disgusting. I mean, really, anybody in crisis management, 101 crisis management is you take advice from multiple sources. You don't hand your authority over to, you know, the expert that's the leader in that particular field. You've got to weigh that up against everything else. And you've got to make the decision, you've got to own the decision, and you've got to lead. No, he deserved to be turfed on that basis alone. And he was right. He rightly lost that election and was kicked out on his backside.
And unfortunately, it enhanced just about every incumbent state premier.
Yes, and this is where I think as a people and as a media and you know, it is a cultural change we've got to do. We've got a lot of work to do, and we've got to start at that grassroots level.
I think the other thing we've got to do is really go back to the Constitution for a start, and start looking at what's my role and what's the state's role, and start looking. All right, a lot of it's been confused over the years. Some of it's been caused by the High Court, and that's another organisation that was a good going over too. But the only way we can do that is maybe for some of their decisions, take them to a referendum and overturn the High Court's decision, because some of them are absolutely foul in regards to the running of the country.
My sympathies for the Liberal Party are small, but they do exist. And the sympathy I have is that we are dealing with a populace that believes that it is the role of government to parent and look after you, not that it's the role of a citizen to be a responsible citizen, and that government should be kept small, and the government's role is just to provide the basic essential services, that government is a necessary evil we must have to regulate the excesses of the market, but that they should stay back, that they should be, you know, we should have small government. You can't have small government if you don't actively seek to ensure small government, because the natural order of those bureaucracies in government and in corporations is to grow, and to grow themselves. And it's exponential. The more power they've got, the more they'll grow, and the faster they'll grow. And we're getting to a situation now where, yep, we're looking like a big fat bureaucracy. And the only correction that can occur is if we suffer a lot of pain. And I just really hope we don't have to go through that as Australians. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, you know, and trying to contribute as so many other people that you've had on your show do. And I know there are lots of great people out there working to try to kind of bring some balance before we have to go through this pain. But you can't walk around with these $1.5 trillion worth of government debt and think it's not going to cost us, as interest rates are going up, that's not going to cost us. It really is.
That was an interesting conversation with Graham Haycroft, the founder of the unions. And he was just speaking in regards to the bureaucracies within the health and education department. The system has grown to where there's, for every 10 people on the coalface, there's 10 people in bureaucracy. And the worst part is the people in bureaucracy, because of their different levels with all those 10, you'll probably have a level of 3 and then another person in charge of them, and there's another little tier. So you get to the top of that tier of those 10 people, now they're on maybe $300,000 a year plus. And so the wage bill for the bureaucracy outstrips the coalface by about 2 to 1.
And
in cost.
this is ridiculous. It's unsustainable. And this is the whole thing. And I keep saying to people, I feel like giving up. I could think of nothing better at this stage of my life than to just, sail off into a beach somewhere and forget about it all. But you've got to serve your country. We have to be grown-ups. We have to stand up. We have to speak out. And the first step, people say to me, should I go back into the Liberal Party and work from within, or should I join a minor party and work from without? My answer to that is either, but do one. Do one or the other. You've got to do something. You've got to get in the game now. It's the time for sitting on the sidelines and laughing at the woke kids is over. The woke kids are dangerous, and they're in power, and we have got to get moving if we're going to save this country. We really do. And
we've got to get to work to get over the wokes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you'll get criticised. You'll get laughed at, like I do, and everybody, you're overstating it. You're being too. Really? Are we really overstating it? Look what we just went through. And that was bureaucracy-driven decision-making of the worst kind that wrecked us economically, and deprived us of our civil liberty. But forget about all the, morality around that. I mean, the civil liberties deprivation, the fact that someone with an Australian passport couldn't come home from overseas. That stuff is horrible. I mean, I don't care if you have to go and sit out in the bush for 4 weeks in quarantine. You've got to let people come home to their own country. The Australian passport isn't worth anything if you don't have that. That's a fundamental basic right. And yes, you may have to go and sit in the middle of the Northern Territory for a month in a quarantine camp, but you cannot be restricted from returning home. That is just wrong. And you had families being separated, loved ones. It was just, and it was unevenly felt. That's the other thing. A lot of people suffered that other people didn't suffer, and so because of that, because it wasn't equally felt, we see that a lot of people just re-electing the politicians that did this to us. But this is my point around the industry groups is that these corporate I think corporations have got to understand that eventually that it will affect them. I think they're sort of riding on this it's a bit of a wind of, look, we can be a big corporation and be capitalists and make money, and we can take advantage of the free market capitalist economy. And then we can look like good guys by doing all this woke stuff, right? Well, there's going to be a reckoning, and the reckoning is going to be that the left-wing sort of governments that you endorse will eventually start eating you as well, and your bureaucracy. And our businesses are going to start. Our big businesses are going to fail like our small businesses, or suffer like our small businesses are. I hope they don't fail, but so I think the people who are sitting quietly in boardrooms and C-suites and C-suite jobs, all across Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane and Adelaide and Perth, need to wake up. They need to stop scoffing and laughing at people like Clive Palmer, who was actually investing considerable capital of his own in a fight for whatever reasons he was doing it. Doesn't matter what his motivations were. The point was he was doing it. And he, they've got to get a little bit more worried, because we're starting to see with things like Jim Chalmers' manifesto the real plans of what a far left Labor Green controlled government is going to do to Australia, its culture and its economy. And capital, these industry bodies like the Business Council and like the Australian Industry Group and like all of the industry organisations that you've mentioned, they've got to start directing their members or inspiring members who can afford it to put capital and effort into supporting free market liberal economics and politics and media. Because if we don't start moving in that direction and supporting these guys who are doing this and people who are taking a lot of chances. I mean, I'm at the age where it doesn't matter, but there's a lot of 30-somethings out there that are trying to give this a go to fix the country. We've got to get behind these kids. We've got to get behind them financially fast, and we've got to support them and fund them. And we need to see large amounts of capital going their way to shift this culture, because it's not going to shift any other way.
Well, the group that really concerns me is the coal industry. I cannot believe the coal industry is just sucking it up. I mean, here's what for Australia. There's two industries that are saving our dollar and keeping it sort of afloat, and that's the iron ore industry and the coal industry. Now, the iron ore industry, they seem to sort of just get on. Well, I don't know much about where they live, but the coal industry, I have a lot to do with the coal industry and talk to people in the coal industry. But the fact that they've giving up on having their own peak body and sent that into oblivion into the Resources Council, so it's just a part of that. And I don't know if you're seeing that useless ads they're running in regards to the royalties and that. These people are trying to act as they're apolitical. They need to wake up and they need to realise they need to be political. I think organisations, even in the community thing, you have organisations complaining about crime and things like that. And the first thing we want to appear to be apolitical because we can talk to both parties on it. The whole
there is no apolitical anymore.
You have to be political. You've got to threaten. Our group wants to throw out every politician that's not going to fix the problem. So you've got to be political, and this being apolitical is just a stupid thing.
No, and I mean, look, my work in crisis management. I mean, that's there's two sides of PR, right? The PR you do in corporate reputation and building your corporate reputation or building a reputation. You go out and you make positive relations with everybody you can. You map all your stakeholders that can influence your business. And you go out and you start building relationships and trying to build trust and doing the right thing and trying to build good relationships so you have good business and a good reputation, right? That's PR 101 stuff. But when you are under attack, when you're doing issues management and crisis management PR, and you are under attack from an adversary that's mean and nasty and wants you to die and doesn't want you to exist at all, which is what a lot of the left are like, and particularly in the environmental space, we've got some very radical people that would just rather we all weren't here. Then you can't play Mr. Nice Guy negotiation. These people are not going to. You have to bring a threat of pain. If there is no threat of pain to the other party, then they will get away with. They will do whatever they like. So yes, by all means, try to have good relations. Try to have good business relations. Try to operate with people where you can on a positive, goodwill, honest, open, transparent, build your reputation as being that kind of person. That's all wonderful. It's all important. It's all fantastic. But when you are in conflict, when there is an issue, when there is crisis, when there is a drama, and you are being attacked by hostile stakeholders who do not care whether you exist or you cease to exist tomorrow, you must apply a different rule set. And in your negotiations must be stronger and harder and tougher. And you have got to be more aggressive, and you've got to bring some pain to them. You've got to demonstrate a risk. And so, no, if you're the coal industry body, you can't be apolitical in this current climate. You've got to be fiercely political, and you've got to be fiercely political against your adversaries that want to wipe you off the face of the earth. Because if you play the apolitical game of negotiating to that PR 101 stuff, you're going to be finished, because all you're going to be doing is, as you said, mitigating the bad legislation, mitigating the damage, and you'll be mitigating, and they'll be pushing, right? No, there comes a point where you've got to go, oh, we're pushing back now, and understand, you guys, that you could lose, right? It's not just that we might go back to zero. It's not just that we might go back to a situation where, Mabo and Wick, to use a different example, represent the native title rules that we're going to follow. We might push back even further, and you might find you got bugger all left if you keep pushing this way, right? And it's not just, Indigenous affairs, or look at what's happening around gender politics and all that stuff. It's like, you keep pushing this way, right? And all those gains you made in the 80s of ordinary people like us accepting, okay, some people are gay, we accept it, we get on with it, live and let live, all that. Well, people are going to be the less reasonable people are going to go, well, sorry, no, we're done now. You want to push it this far? We're going to push you back this far. If they don't, this is the problem with Australia and the left and the woke and a lot of these causes. They don't see any risk. They see only the status quo or more gain. So they keep pushing, right? So until they realize that there's a force coming this way, and that if they push too far this way, it's going to push them back this way, they're not going to change their behavior. Why would that? There's nothing in it for them, right? And that's what we've got to start to realize. Many people on the other side of a lot of these issues, we've got to realize that we have to bring, a little bit of a threat of pain. I hate being nasty and stuff in business. I like to do it all positively, but you can only have positive goodwill to a point. If it's not reciprocated, that's a different rule set you got to play with. And you're right. That's what they're not doing. And it's what these industry bodies aren't doing because they're too comfortable, like our politicians. We've got a lot of people on the opposition benches getting a nice big fat salary. I'd like to see opposition salaries cut in half.
Well,
Right? If you're in opposition, you work half the amount of time. You can have another job on the side, but you get nothing unless you're in government.
I suppose the thing is, farmers and that can see the pain come to them each time new regulations come down from the government that makes their life that much harder through more burden of administration, providing more data, having their daily lives disrupted, and also cutting into their productivity time by this administration that comes in. But until they get to what you're saying, this thing, you've got to get to a certain pain level before you sort of say, well, I'm going to do something different now. I'm not just going to go along with the flow. And I think with farmers and that, it will be that they get to that position and they'll just have to start looking at voting in different people into their organisations at the representative level, and then force those representative levels to have a real hard look at their setup as far as their board and central organisation. And it's things like I say, with the cane growers, I think the first thing, and I've said it to their former president, I said, the first thing you need to do is get that office down there in Ann Street or wherever it is, get it and drag it back to Mackay and have all your people there in Mackay around with your industry. And so all the farmers can get in their ear every day, every week, and until they understand what their job is to work for them, not have a relationship with the people in William Street and George Street.
Absolutely. And we've got to get the ABC out of South Bank in Brisbane and out of Ultimo in Sydney and out of South Melbourne or wherever it is in Melbourne.
Well, I have a bit of thought about that. I think the ABC was established for a legitimate reason back in the days before there was commercial. I think as a regional person, I've seen regional media stripped back over the time. I think a good thing would be to get rid of a lot of this ABC in the major cities and push it into the regions to do basic journalism, even if it goes back to also like send a set out to Longreach and they've got to produce a daily paper or something like that, and then radio stations and things like that in those sort of places. And that's probably because I think the regions need that. The cities certainly don't need it.
No, look, we need a total rethink around the ABC. I mean, there's no justification in the age of the internet anymore for half of it because the information services that it used to provide are provided by the internet. It's very easy to find and access information, but there's a lot of journalism that could be done. Like there's two areas of journalism: regional journalism and global journalism, foreign correspondence. And I think the ABC, that's where the market fails, right? Where commercial news organizations can't afford to hire journalists to go out into around the world and into the bush and stuff. So they need to be supplemented. But I think you have a government organization perhaps doing that, like the ABC. It's set up independently. It's funded for that purpose. And then that material that they produce is available for use by all media outlets.
Just moving on to a solution for going forward and that. There's two things in regards to political parties. I don't believe any political party can represent people in the regions and in the cities. I don't think like your Liberal Democrats. I've had a fair bit to do with Tim Coory when he was the member for Northern Victoria MLC. Had him on the show. I agree with some of the stuff that the Liberal Democrats are, and some fiercely don't. But the thing is, I still can't see any chance of a political party that sort of operates from Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane ever able to represent the regional people. We had a reasonable system with the Liberals and Nationals if you go back 20, 30 years ago, where they were fiercely independent. The merger in Queensland obliterated that and basically just wiped out the Nationals and Liberals from northern Queensland and central Queensland, and even in New South Wales, they seemed to be joined at the hip with in the days of Barilaro and Baird and that. And so, do you think we really need to, like with your Liberal Democrats sort of thought, do you think they need a different group in the regions and then the Liberal Democrats or whatever they're going to be, because they have to get rid of that Liberal name? I think they're going to be Liberty Democrats in the future. Do you think they need to look at, or all parties need to look at a coalition partner in the regions?
Yeah, look, well, I'm not a member of the Liberal Democrats anymore. Just to be clear, I had some issues with the party after the election, but I I want to go back to doing my commentator work. So I mean, I joined them because they represented my values best at that time, and I supported Campbell. As for do we need a country party? Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. We need to get back to having a strong national party, and I could think of nothing better for Queensland than to have a strong national party. I think there's also a need for the Liberal Party to split. I've said this a number of times, that you can't serve two masters and have any credibility.
Broad church isn't a possibility anymore.
Yeah, well, you can't be a conservative, and you can't be that the broad church is too broad. Yeah, I mean, you can't be a conservative and be a liberal, a left-leaning liberal. And have them in the same party, because the ideologies don't agree. Even the centre right, I'm a centre right liberal. I'm not a social conservative. I'm a very strong economic free market person, but I'm a classic. I'd be defined as a classical liberal, and I don't feel comfortable with a lot of the views of the liberal left. So I can't see how that party can survive. It's two separate brands. So maybe we need to see the conservative side of that party splinter off with a national country party. Maybe that could work. And then you have an inner city teal sort of left Liberal Party, which I think would just die out and dissolve into.
I was going to say, well, that's just Labor light.
Well, right, but I mean, they seem to be a big enough group, and they don't want to join the Labor Party. They seem to want to have control of the Liberal Party, so maybe that's the way they go. But the problem is we're not even seeing within the National Party that there's consistent conservative views either. I mean, you've got some fairly left of centre ideas coming to the National Party as well, and people in the National Party. So I think we've just got to take a step back and go, okay, we need a country party that's going to represent country people strongly. I think we probably need a party that represents conservative, non-inner city suburban and small satellite city sort of people, because I think they're a bit more grassroots and connected to reality than the inner city.
Well, we actually did have a good chance of having a Conservative Party when Bernardi first started up, and that was an interesting sort of thing. There's another guy, put him in the same category as Pauline Hanson, comes up with an idea and a party, but wants to have full control sort of thing. And I remember 2017, one of their state people came up to Cairns for a bit of a talk and sort of see what the grassroots feelings was for the Conservative Party. And a former LNP member who had sort of got tossed out or couldn't be with the party anymore, organised it, and there was about 400 people at the yacht club this evening. And I reckon everyone who walked in the door would have signed in and handed over at least $50. And right at that instance, there was an opportunity to form what would have been the biggest and strongest political branch in Cairns of any party ever, right there on that night. And the general conversation went around, and it got to question and answers. And I says, well, look at the size of this group here. They're all interested in getting involved right now. Can we form a branch tonight? Can we sort of form, elect a couple of people to sort of as interim president or whatever, and get it started? Their reaction, the person who came up, is basically Bernardi wasn't interested in. They weren't interested in setting up branches. They didn't think they needed to keep control of the organisation at this stage. and not allow other influences to come in. And I said, well, that's really not the point of a political party. You want members, and you want people to work for you and contribute. But that obviously wasn't their thing. Now, my understanding.
No, I think that's one of the things I learned. A lot of political parties don't want, right? They want the control. They want to keep the members out. And I think we're seeing that. A lot of conservatives now are complaining they can't get into the Liberal Party. People who left and went and joined the UAP, or went and left and joined the Liberal Democrats or One Nation, who now think, oh, well, the best way might be to get back inside the Liberal National Party. They can't get back in, or they can't get in if they've never been in. So because they're conservatives. So it's a really weird phenomenon, but you're right. And I think the only way around it is, I mean, Menzies achieved it. I think it was 30 political parties that he pulled into a room that first weekend when they founded the Liberal Party. So it can be done, you know, if you can do it with 30 political parties, surely we can do it with the handful we've got now. But there needs to be, it really comes down to the constitution of the party and the rules around, you know, policy making and who gets to say what and do what, because you do have to have a lot of discipline when you make a decision. You can't go out into the public. One of the problems with Liberal Democrats is they go out and they bleed all their arguments and everything in public on Facebook. It's like, it's just craziness. So, you know, you've got to do, that's got to happen behind closed doors in a systematic and organized way. There have to be rules and structures around all that stuff. But you can't shut people down either. It can't be this top-down autocratic kind of thing, because you won't have a party. You won't have any grassroots. So it's got to be, how can we extract the best from people at the grassroots level, and then put that within a structure of discipline, you know, where there is a respect for the structure. But you won't get that respect for the structure unless the structure is good and it really does let people have their say. And so it's getting that balance right. And I mean, you know, that's something I think a lot of corporations wrestle with as well, or any businesses wrestle with, but it's hard, you know. You've got to get that balance right. You've got to be able to let people have a voice, but also have that discipline. But there's a lot of politics in politics, Bill.
Oh, of course.
Funnily enough.
But I think that's another thing is in regards to people trying to get back into the Liberal Party. I mean, my history is I was born into a family that the Prime Minister was called Pig Iron Bob, all bosses are bastards and all that sort of thing. And then you gradually grow up, and then you sort of, you know, you might join the Labor Party for several years, and then you see things like destruction of Victoria's Tricontinental Bank, the pyramid collapse, and a few other things happen. And you think, oh, maybe these people don't know what they're doing. And so you join the other party and go from there.
Yeah, I wasn't born, you know, a free marketer. I you know, as they say, if you're under 25 and you're not a socialist, you haven't got a heart. And if you're over 25 and you're still a socialist, you haven't got a brain, or something like that. But I you know, I mean, I was in my early journalism career, I mean, I think I was pretty narrow-minded and fairly left-wing, and pretty had a bit more attitude than I should have had. And it was only through maturing and growing up and hard knocks that makes you sort of wake up and grow up and change your views. And I think we've got to get our elders back. This is why I think it's so important to have elders in there, because you've got to have people who've had life experience outside of politics, media, government relations, PR, HR, you know, people with real jobs and real, you know, done real work.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest problems for Australia. There are so few people who capture that position or have that image with a good portion of the population. You get people who are sort of heroes or sort of guiding lights in certain areas, but they don't have it across the whole spectrum of industry. No, it's just their local area. So it's pretty hard to get someone who's of the caliber that you need to get a new organisation, or even stabilise an old organisation, because even like you look at the LNP, I still can't see how that's going to work, because it doesn't represent the regions. But even
it's not working, and it's not going to work.
They're struggling to find a really great president or something like that who can complement and sort of also provide wisdom and guidance to the political head as well, because there's a big difference sometimes in the political head, like Chris Fordy, he's probably only in his 40s or whatever, but sometimes you need a wise head in their 60s and that in that president's role that has a lot of contacts, there's a lot of people who believe in him from right across the field, especially in business and commands a lot of respect across a wide spectrum of people.
Yeah. And it's not something that can be built overnight either. It's tough. It really is tough, which is why I do have I mean, I don't sound like I'm a harsh critic, I guess, but I do have a bit of sympathy for anybody in politics these days. And I think we've just got to hope and pray that we get the right mix of talent in there and we get the right types of people with the right good intentions line up, the right way, and do everything we can in the meantime to try to make that happen. Which is why I do the show. And while I'll keep doing it, we're sort of stumbling our way through having conversations like this, I guess, to try to understand where things are at, looking at the news in a different way. And that's what the other side's all about. It's just about looking at the news from a different worldview, nothing radical, just classical liberal, sort of old fashioned, moderately conservative centre-right worldview. We're just not getting that in our mainstream media. And when you do that, it looks radical these days because we're saying things that other people wouldn't dare to say. And that's a pretty sad state of affairs. And I hope it changes. And I hope our show becomes mainstream. So yours does too. So
I think one of the things that maybe the Libs and the Nationals and those need to do is really go back and appeal to their base to join the party and give it something to believe in. So branches can be, have good numerical numbers and that, because I think a lot of the problems is there's a lot of branches with too few people in it. Even if they have to go back to some sort of system where instead of just trying to have a branch for every state electorate, maybe you just have to do some sort of consolidation. So every branch has to have at least 100 people in it before it can split down or something. Because
look, the rules have got to be changed. It's obvious that the branch stacking thing is an issue. The problem is that the people who have the power now are the people who change those rules to suit themselves, and that's why they're in power. And so the change is going to have to come from people going in and quietly working through the system or changing the system, or it's going to have to come from the minor parties from without. I mean, they're pretty much finished as a force in mainland Australia now. I know that we've been in this situation before, but I don't think with the culture that we've got now, I think it's really crunch time for the Liberal Party. I think it has been for a few years. There's been a lot of denial inside that party about, nationally about where it's at. A lot of people doing what they do in organisations, in business. You see it all the time in crisis management where, the executives run around as if there's no problem, the ship's not sinking, everything's fine. And they convince themselves because they don't feel any different. They get up every morning, they go the same, they've still got the same titles, they think it's the same. And they're just in denial of the reality that, oh, actually, in Western Australia, we only have 2 members of parliament. We are a tiny, tiny minor party in one big state. And we're heading that way in every other place. And that's a crisis. And they need to wake up to the fact that they have a crisis. So, I mean, sometimes you need somebody to come in and go, okay, that's it, guys. You're done. You've had your time and you haven't done a good job. And we need a complete revolution here of this party. Takes a bloody strong organisation and very strong people to do that. So I think maybe the change will come from the outside. There'll be a new party, but it's got to be funded. And you've got to get capital behind these things. And I don't see capital going in the right direction. And as I wrote an article, and I don't know why, and that brings us back to where we started. So
I suppose the thing is, both with fixing the political parties, especially the Liberal Party and those on the right of centre, and industry bodies, nothing will change until we get to that where we have to be almost brutalised and shaken awake we need to change, because
Yeah.
we have to, I think the way things are going from the climate change thing through net zero 2050 and all those things that are in operation, we will have to get to the blackouts and all those sort of stages until we realise, no, these people have got it wrong and they've just been telling us things, and then maybe people will sort of wake up. But I don't think Australians are. We've got in this to complacency and being a little bit apathetic. We really have to go back to get to the stage where we're getting beaten around the ears to say, well, no, we have to pick up our own game and start changing things.
Yep.
Okay, look, we've done our hour on that, so we might as well wrap it up. If you'd just like to give us a little bit of a summary of what you're doing now and how we can get onto your the other side, and maybe just comment on your input to the Spectator, because I've started to read a few stories. So is that going to be a continuing thing for yourself, where you got to have time to do that and the other side?
I'm going to try. It's a hobby. It's all a hobby at the moment. So it's challenging because I've still got to earn an income on the in other ways. It's challenging. I mean, the media is under a lot of pressure in Australia, and there's not a lot of money in it. Look, yes, I'll be writing for the Spectator as regularly as I possibly can. And the show will be every week. On Tuesday nights, we'll have an interview show, and actually Campbell Newman is my first guest. We're going to be talking about pretty much what we've been talking about here, to a large extent, about the liberal, future of conservative and liberal politics. That'll be Tuesday night. That drops. You can watch anytime you like, of course. It's on demand, but the shows come out on Tuesday night, the interview show. And on Friday night, starting Friday the 14th, is the other side, the news summary show, which is the main show. So that's like a 40-minute wrap of the news of the week. The first 20 minutes probably give you the wrap of the news of the week. You can hang on for the rest if you're interested. But it's designed to be something that quickly brings you up to date, gives you the news from a slightly different worldview perspective, and hopefully keeps people up to date with the issues that really do matter in our country. So we will step away from The Voice every now and then. We will cover things like that, but we will move away into other issues that are probably underlying, that are more important, that are getting ignored, or things like that. But please do join us Friday nights and Tuesday nights. ADH-TV, Australia Digital Holdings, and it's the website. It's just watch.adh.tv, no .com or anything, just adh.tv. That'll get you to the website. You can download the app, or you can do it on your phone in the Google App Store or the iPhone App Store, or you can look it up on your smart TV. A lot of smart TVs have ADH as one of the apps, and you can put that up into your favorite apps, and it'll appear as soon as you turn your TV on, and then you just go into that. It looks like Netflix when you go in. You see Alan Jones, you'll see my show, you'll see Daisy Cousins, Fred Paul, lots of other great people doing shows and things, and you can watch whenever you like.
Okay, Damian, we'll just wrap it up there. If you just stay on the line, I'll just introduce next week's show. If you enjoyed tonight's show, please like and share our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next week, we're looking to have the episode we were planning for last week with David Foote from the Australian Cattle Association. So please join us again next week.